I'm going to scare everybody today a little bit. And I would say that's not my intention, but it is my intention. I really have a lot of things I want to discuss with the saints going into the month of September. Who's heard of some stuff going on in September? You're not quite sure what everybody's fussing about, what all the fuss is. I'm going to take the next 2 or 3 weeks to one step by step take you through some things. I'm going to try to get through 10 today, and I'm reading strictly articles. I may throw my 2 cents on there on top to help you understand context, but really I'm reading articles that are in the mainstream. So these are things that are happening, and I want you all to understand. This week I'm going to focus more on certain days, holy days that are coming up that are significant. But as the weeks go, I want you all to really start seeing that we are in a certain point in time that has never been possible since the beginning of time. We're coming up on the 70th year, feast year. 40 Jubilee cycles this year will have included since Jesus was here. 40 and a half Jubilee cycles have expired since Jesus left up till now. And a Jubilee cycle is every 50 years. We'll show you a little bit more about that. That's significant because when he died and he left here, he went to sit on the throne as king in heaven. So for 40 Jubilee cycles, he's been sitting on the throne in heaven. This isn't just the end of a 70-year cycle. This is the year of Jubilee. This goes into the next year, which is the 50th year, the year of Jubilee. Very significant year. To have this year happen again, you would have to go for 50 years. So there are windows that are opening right now. We've talked about that as a church. A lot of people say, well, Pastor, you don't have to celebrate Pentecost, and you don't really have to celebrate Feast of Trumpets, and you don't have to celebrate, and we don't celebrate or worship them or observe them the same way the Jews do. But when the Lord gives you a day in the earth where he says he will bless you, guess what? Even though we're no longer under the law, the day has a window that still exists. So if you honor God on certain particular days and you have them in your mind and your heart, you need to understand heaven still recognizes those holy days. There are 3 high holy days that Israel has. Man, I'm trying to name them. The first one is Passover. There you go. Passover. Counting 50 days from Passover, you have Pentecost. And then we're approaching in September the Feast of Trumpets, which is the Sukkot. So the September has always been significant for a lot of feast days, but this year is a particularly different type of thing. So September, today I hope to get through 10. If I don't, I'm not going to keep you very long. I don't intend to. I want you all to basically just start listening to some of the things that are happening in September and tell me by the end of this service, or the end of this series rather, if you don't see what I see. What's happening politically, what's happening all around the world, what's happening with some of the judicial rulings that are coming down in our nation, what's happening with some of the pressures that are happening in our community, some of the laws that are being, I don't know if you want to say they're being changed, but they're being ignored. Things are happening. There's movements happening. And the first thing that I'll talk about today will be interesting if you've never really paid attention to these things. But in the next few weeks, I promise to blow your mind with some of the things that man is planning to do and what man is doing and been doing that most of us really hadn't had a clue were happening. But the first thing I want to talk about is an Israeli rabbi who says that the Messiah is coming. He's a very old man. I'm just going to read the article to you. Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky, a leading authority in mainstream ultra-Orthodox Judaism, has been given a clear, unequivocal message recently of the coming of the Messiah is imminent. Now, when he says Messiah, what we understand he's saying is Antichrist, because they have not accepted their Messiah yet. They're still looking for a leader, and just not exactly time for Jesus to come on the scene yet. So whoever this man is talking about is not the Messiah. We know the Messiah, Jesus Christ. He's talking about a ruler, a leader that will rise up and deliver Israel from all of the pressures that are surrounding Israel. And you all recognize there's a lot of pressure building around Israel. The only way that's going to be released is when a leader rises up in the earth and becomes to Israel a Messiah, a Savior, in a physical sense, in a political sense. They're not looking for their soul to be saved. They have the law of Moses. They believe that Moses' law purifies them, and they don't have that issue that a lot of us wrestle with our sin. They're not purified from the inside out. They purify from the outside in, and they think that the law saves them. And we know this is not true. Their Messiah has to be something more than a leader, a political leader that keeps them from war and political pressure. However, this man is saying the Messiah is imminent. He is urging the Jews to make Aliyah as soon as possible. Aliyah is the Hebrew word for going up. Refers to the immigration to Israel, which is seen as a higher spiritual action that can help herald the coming of the Messiah. When asked about the timing of the Messiah's arrival, Rabbi Kanevsky answered, at the end of the sabbatical year. The sabbatical year is September 14th to next year's Feast of Sukkot. So from this September until next September, they're saying that before the end of the sabbatical year, he'll be here. Very, very interesting. This is one of the top rabbis in Israel, and he's telling the nation, and he's telling people in other nations that by the end of the sabbatical year, which is the next year coming up, not 14 to 15 September, but September 2015 to September 2016 is the 50th sabbatical year, the year of Jubilee. So he's saying that they'll be here. Several people have asked the rabbi to verify this, and he has given the same answer each time. This year is a sabbatical year, and it will be ending in the 29th day of Elul, which by the Gregorian calendar, which is our calendar, falls on Saturday, September 6th or 12th, 2015. Oh, he's saying the end of the sabbatical year ends in 2015, sorry. But in answer to Rabbi Kavinsky's call, the Jews of France have begun to arrive in Israel in blessed droves. The impetus is certainly a reaction to increasing anti-Semitism, Semitic Islamic fueled violence across Europe. There are people, they're saying from France, that are flocking to Israel right now. They're leaving France because it's such a hard environment for them there that they're flocking to Israel. Israel is expanding by the day. By the moment, they're expanding. Planes are just filling and flooding. They're telling people, don't wait till the last minute. If you feel anti-Semitism, you feel the pressure of the anti-Semitic people coming against you, get out of there, don't even wait. Because in World War II, the Jews stayed put until it was upon them. They're saying, don't let that happen to you again. You have a home this time. You have a refuge this time. Come home to Israel. Make Aliyah. Come home. This is the year that, first of all this persecution is building against you, but this is also the year that the Messiah will be returning. So in essence, what he's saying, a figure is going to rise up in the next year, ending with, if he's saying this is the end of the sabbatical cycle to this year, I thought it was next year. He's saying anytime from now in the next year, we should see a figure rising up. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. The next thing I want to show you is, let me go back, because this is a short video, very short video. I could talk to you about it, but I think you should hear from the man that God gave it to. This is Rabbi Khan, and he is telling you about the Shemitah. The Shemitah happens this month. He'll tell you about that right now. Once you get this, everything else I say for the next 2 or 3 weeks will really start to connect. But you got to watch this quick video, and I'll return as soon as it's complete.
What we're going to open up tonight is a mystery that is over 3,000 years old from the Bible. It's called the mystery of the Shemitah. It lies behind and is determining the rise and fall of the stock market, the rise and fall of our economy. It is behind the rise of nations and the fall of powers, empires, superpowers. The key to when global cataclysms come, the timing of world wars, even the atomic age, the Cold War, 9/11, the rise of America itself and what may be the fall, the past, present, and future In the Bible, Leviticus 25, it says you will sow, reap for 6 years, and on the 7th year you will rest, the land will rest. It was the Sabbath year. Just like there was a Sabbath day, every 7th day was the Sabbath day, every 7th year was the Sabbath year, and it was called the Shemitah. In that year, an entire year of rest, there was no sowing, no reaping, no plowing of the fields. There was nothing, no buying or selling of the fruits of the land. For an entire year, the purpose was to turn away from the world and turn to God. The last day is in the month of Elul, and it's the 29th day. It's called Elul 29. On that day, as the Shemitah goes to its peak, all debts are wiped out, all credits wiped out. The financial accounts of the nation are wiped clean. On the day, Elul 29, it's the day of nullification, wipe out of everything financial, and it was to be a blessing. But as Israel turned away from God and went after other gods, the Shemitah becomes, from a sign of blessing, becomes a sign of judgment. In the year 586 BC, in the days of the prophet Jeremiah, the Shemitah comes upon Israel in the form of judgment. The armies of Babylon overrun the land. The land is devastated. Jerusalem is destroyed. And the people are removed and taken captive into Babylon. And the prophet Jeremiah is told that the judgment will last 70 years because of the mystery of the Shemitah. In the law, in the Torah, it said when the judgment comes, the land will rest and will observe its Sabbaths. Then the land will rest. For all the Shemitahs, or Sabbath years, it did not rest. They broke 70 Sabbath years, or Shemitah. So now God says, you're gonna be removed from the land, from the blessings, and the land will now observe its Sabbaths. Tishri is the most holy month of the Hebrew year, of the calendar. Tishri is the year of trumpets, Yom Kippur, tabernacles. Tishri is the month that opens up the Shemitah, and it's the month that closes the Shemitah. The majority of greatest crashes in history, single day, happen all around the month of Tishri. Now that is against odds. Now for years, financial analysts have been mystified. Well, the answer's in the Bible. In the Bible, the month of Tishri is September, October, the very time that God appointed for the financial wipeout. But it gets even more stunning. And it's the phenomenon of the Shemitah has been increasing in the last 14 years. The mystery is so big that it literally affects the rise and fall of nations. Shemitah, the Hebrew word means the release, but it can also mean the shaking, the fall, the collapse. In 586 BC, when the Shemitah, the judgment of the Shemitah comes on Israel, not only is Judah, the kingdom, wiped out, but it causes Babylon to rise. And then Babylon falls and Persia rises, of course, because the 70 years are up. Even Babylon and Persia are linked to the timing of the Shemitah. So could the Shemitah be affecting world history to this day, and the rise and fall of empires or superpowers? The greatest shaking in world history up to the beginning of the 20th century was the First World War in history, the war to end all wars. 1917 is the year of the Shemitah. In that year, Shemitah means collapse. The Russian Empire collapses. Before the end of that war, the Austrian Empire will collapse, the German Empire will collapse, the Turkish Empire will collapse, collapsing of powers. The Shemitah is also about the rise of nations. In that Shemitah, it's the beginning of the rise of America as a superpower. America enters the war, becomes the head of nations. And at that time, the British Empire reaches near bankruptcy. The financial center of the world moves from Britain and the old world to America in that war. And America becomes the greatest creditor nation in the world. World history changes with a Shemitah. Fast forward, bring us to the Shemitah of the year 1945, another global cataclysm. World War II, the greatest cataclysm ever in world history. It reaches its peak in the year of the Shemitah. Hitler begins the seizing of Europe by seizing Austria and Czechoslovakia in the year 1938, the conflict begins. 1938 is the year of the Shemitah. The war will last 7 years, the years of the Shemitah. It will reach its crescendo with a final Shemitah, 1945. You know, the 7-year cycle of the Shemitah will end in the first week of September 1945. In that same week, the war, the Second World War, comes to its end. The day that they seal that, the day of this procession, is Elul 29, the very day of the Shemitah. And America becomes the superpower of the world in that Shemitah. A new world order begins with that Shemitah. A new financial order called Bretton Woods, where all across the world, the economies, the currencies are based on the American dollar. The Shemitah, though, also means the fall. If one goes 4 Shemitahs later, it brings us to the year 1973, just as crucial. That year, America makes a fateful decision to legalize the killing of its unborn children. That same month, in the financial realm, it collapses. That same year, Bretton Woods, the world order based on the dollar, collapses. That same year, America, the world's preeminent superpower, suffers its first defeat in modern history, if not ever, as it loses the war in Vietnam. And the day it loses the war in Vietnam is the exact same day it won the war in the Second World War. Day of its greatest victory becomes the day of its defeat. What happens if we move 4 more Shemitahs into the future? It takes us to the year 2001. As the Shemitah reaches its peak of 2001, its last week, the week that is heading to Elul 29, the week of nullification, wipeout, as it reaches its peak, comes 9/11 in that week. The Shemitah means collapse. The towers collapse. The towers representing America's preeminence collapse. There's an ancient biblical mystery connecting the rising of towers and the rise of power or nations. Well, let me share this. At the moment of America's greatest supremacy, 1945, towers over everything, a tower is conceived which is going to represent America's greatness. And that tower is called the World Trade Center. It is conceived in the year of the Shemitah. Its construction begins much later in 1966. 1966 is the year of the Shemitah. It is built for 7 years, the 7 years of the Shemitah. It is finished and opens in the year 1973. 1973 is the year of the Shemitah. And it's destroyed in the year 2001, the year of the Shemitah. The Shemitah gives a warning. The nations, what it warns is, a nation's blessing and prosperity comes from God alone. And if the nation drives God out of its life and defies and blasphemes God, those blessings cannot remain. The Shemitah is linked to the end times. I mean, look, think about the 7-year tribulation, 7 years, Shemitah. The 70 years, the 77s of Daniel, Shemitahs. But I want to share this mystery here, and that is this. When you had every 7th year was a Shemitah, Sabbath year. Every 7 Shemitahs opens up the Jubilee. During the Jubilee, prisoners are released, and most uniquely, if you lost your land on the Jubilee, it was restored to you. Whatever you lost your ancestral possession, your father's house, it was restored on the Jubilee. You came back. It says everyone shall return to his father's possession, to your ancestral land. You see, for 2,000 years, the Jewish people were driven from their land. 2,000 years, they had no land. They lost their father's possession. But something happens. World War I, I mentioned this, the Ottoman Turkish Empire, which had ruled the land of Israel for 400 years, Muslim, was not favorable to the Jewish people. In that war to end all wars, the Ottoman Turkish Empire in this year begins to collapse. The British Empire enters the Middle East, enters Jerusalem. The year is 1917, and the British Empire is marching in under the reign of General Allenby, and Jerusalem comes, and Israel for the first time comes under the British Empire, which for the first time under a power that is favorable to the Jewish people in 2,000 years. If you take that Shemitah, go 7 Shemitahs, the 7th Shemitah begins September 1965, ends September 1966. The year of restoration would be September 1966 to September 1967. Does that sound familiar? June 7th, 1967. Israeli soldiers in the Six-Day War. Israel is surrounded, the Arab world, or much of it says we're going to destroy them and drive them into the sea. The Six-Day War happens miraculously. Israeli soldiers enter through the Lion's Gate, and Jerusalem, for the first time, is restored to the Jewish people in 2,000 years. When did it take place? It took place in the exact time period, the year following the 7th Shemitah. I mean, here they are. Here you have the 2 restorations of the land, and they are, one is 1917, one is 1967, 50 years, Jubilee. The Lord said, I will not return until you, Jerusalem, you say, Baruch haba b'Hashem Adonai. Blessed is he. Until the Jewish people, they had to survive for 2,000 years for that to come true. They had to come back to Israel for that to come true. They had to come back to Jerusalem, because that's where they're going to meet him. When is the next 7th Shemitah? It brings you to this year called 2014. It begins in September 2014. It goes to September 2015. Just to be aware, if it does follow, the pattern is there is always war in the Middle East, war in Israel, but it results in a prophetic restoration. And so the sign of judgment, the Shemitah takes the sign of judgment now. The harbinger reveals there are 2 shakings, recent shakings of America. One is 9/11, and the other is the collapse of Wall Street and our economy, the Great Recession. The first shaking takes place in the year 2001. The second takes place in the year 2008. That's a 7-year cycle. In fact, America was commemorating the 7th year of 9/11, while on Wall Street, the second shaking was being set in motion right then. And it reaches its peak on the day September 29th, 2008. They enter the New York Stock Exchange and they ring the opening bell. But the opening bell that day refuses to ring. Even Wall Street took it as a sign. That day comes the greatest point magnitude crash in world history. On what day did the greatest collapse take place in world history? It took place on Elul 29, the wipeout day of the Bible, that God appointed from ancient times to strike the financial realm of a nation. You know, the Shemitah is about the number 7 as well. Not only are they 7 years apart, not only do they happen in the beginning of the 7th month, but in 2001, how much is wiped out? How much percent of Wall Street? 7%. How much is wiped out in that day in 2008? 7%. How many points were wiped out in 2008, greatest crash? 777. 777. The next Shemitah has begun. So where are we now? The stock market has been rising since the collapse of the last Shemitah from 2009. Has been rising and rising. As the Shemitah began, Wall Street began to tremble and sway violently. And the peak collapse of that opening week was September 25th. September 25th was the opening day of the Shemitah. Now something else happened. For the first time, this age of America being the strongest economic power on earth came to an end. It was eclipsed by the nation of China. And this is just the beginning. America's apostasy from God is deepening, quickening, and intensifying. When Israel got its first warning strike, when the first warning strike came in 732 BC, the ones who did it were the Assyrians. And the Assyrians are noted in history as the people who invented what is called terrorism. In America, on 9/11, you have a strike of terrorism. The people who do it are also from the Middle East, as the Assyrians were. The Assyrians carried out their attack on Israel in the language of Akkadian. The closest language today to Akkadian, the sister language, is Arabic. Those who brought that first attack on Israel, that warning strike, are the same ones who years later are going to be responsible for the great calamity that comes, the judgment that comes on the nation. ISIS. ISIS comes from Al-Qaeda. They're an offshoot from the same people who brought...
The Shemitah. It's about an hour and 10-minute video. Jonathan Kahn, I think it's Khan, and I'm sorry about not having an outline today. I'm going to have all of these references for the next few weeks in one. I'm just not finished. There's so much stuff to talk about. I'm still trying to put together, but Jonathan Kahn, and it's called Shemitah, Shmitta. Look it up, watch the video. It's about an hour video. It will blow your mind. But the gates have been breached, and he likens it. If you've never read the book The Harbinger, that's another video or a book you should read called The Harbinger. Definitely check it out. But he says the gates have been breached to this nation's greatness. In 2001, when those towers came down, if you all remember, everything changed. One of the first things that was put into place in this nation was... Patriot Act. Thank you. The Patriot Act was put into place in 2001 or 2 to offset security issues that we were concerned about this not happening again. And it's the same thing that happens. The United Nations rises to power on the backs of a terrible disaster in World War I. So they always try to build institutions to keep you safe, but what they're hoping is that you give over your freedoms for that safety. Things have never been the same since 2001. Some people are happy about that. They think it's necessary. However, notice, since 2001, this nation has not been what it has been. In 2008, he showed you how it crashed 777 points. The bell wouldn't even ring. If that's not I won't say an omen, but if that's not God speaking directly to you, I don't know what is. 7 being God's complete number. It was finished in 2008. What this nation instituted right after that was something that we had really never heard of. We had speculated and talked about using it in the past if it ever got that bad. But quantitative easing put into place. QE1, QE2, and I think we're about to go into 3 or 4 now. What that basically means is they just start printing money. There's nothing backing the money. There's no ledger account balancing or offsetting money. It's just the printing of money. Paper tigers, just fiat currency that has nothing behind it. Once they started QE1, and once they bailed the bank system out in 2008, which they claim was absolutely necessary that we do, they set into effect the collapse economically of this nation. Since 2008, though, the stock market has been popping, booming. It seems like we are on top of the world. And the people that don't really understand what's going on will look at the stock market and just be comfortable and say, this nation's great, as great as it always has been. But I beg to differ with you. What happened in 2008 pretty much sealed the fate of this nation. The dollar is collapsing, and it's going to collapse hard, and it's going to collapse fast. Everything else in the world, based on the Britain rule, everything else in the world is connected to the dollar bill. When the dollar falls, everything falls. It's coming. It has to come, saints. The Bible says that the beast will rise up, and he will give all men a number, and they'll be able to trade, and they have to have that number to participate. It's how currency will be exchanged. That won't be possible if there are dollar bills and currencies in different nations. Currencies have to fall so that the global society can bring in a new currency that everybody uses. Because you got Russia cooking together with BRICS nations, China, you got us over here, you got all these other nations doing their best to hold their currencies together so that they can continue. But we know it's going to fall. So when you're talking about the Shemitah, and I don't want to get too far off track, that stands on its own. And I wanted you all to see that video because we're going to possibly be referring to that a little bit as I continue. Let me go back to pictures here. Okay, maybe not. Giving me attitude. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move past the Shemitah. Rosh Hashanah. It's the next thing we have here. on the list. I have some other scriptures for the Shemitah, but I'm not going to mention that because I think you all pretty much understand that every 7 years, God recognizes the seventh year, and people are supposed to rest. They're not supposed to farm. They're not supposed to tax the land every 7 years. Every 7 years is the 50th year. If you got kicked out of your house and you're a slave to somebody else in Israel, guess what happens on that year? You're free. Whatever debt you owe is wiped out. You get your land back. If they sold it and speculated, other farmers have had it and owned it, they have to give it back to you and your family. Everything is reset. It's a wonderful time if God chooses to bless you. However, it also, if the children of Israel were not where they should be in front of God, it was also a year of the greatest tragedy to ever fall on Israel. It usually happens on that same Shemitah cycle. So let's move on. The next thing, Rosh Hashanah, which is the Feast of Trumpets. This is the day that Israel recognizes that Adam and Eve were created. They say this is where they celebrate the creation of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were created on September 13th this year is the Feast of Trumpets, but on September 15th they actually celebrate Eve's birthday. They don't of course they don't have them together, but they recognize Adam and they recognize Eve. I'm going to read you really quick the heading here. Rosh Hashanah, literally the head of the year. It's their Jewish New Year, and that's coming up on September 13th. The biblical name for this holiday is Ra Torah, literally the day of shouting, raising noise, the Feast of Trumpets. It is the first of the high holy days. A lot of people believe that when the Lord does come back, and the Bible says that trumpet shall sound, a lot of people believe it will be on this day, the Yom Kippur day, the day of the feast. The children of Israel have always blown that trumpet because many times things happen. So a lot of people speculate that it will be somewhere around this time when the Lord cracks the sky and that trumpet blows. Which usually occur in early autumn in the northern hemisphere. Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day celebration which begins the first day of Tishri. Tishri is the first month of the Jewish civil year, the 7th month of the ecclesiastical year. The day is said to be an anniversary of the creation of Adam and Eve, the first man and the first woman. It is the first action towards the realization of human role of God. Rosh Hashanah customs include sounding the shofar and eating symbolic foods, which implies they're dipped in honey to evoke the sweet new year. So it's their new year. The next thing, number 4, 5776, Anno Lucius, or the year of the light. Lucius is the same root word as Lucifer. It's the year of light. And an Anno Lucius is a dating system used in Freemasonry ceremonies, a commemorative proceedings that adds about 4,000 years to the current year calendar, and appends the Anno Lucius year of light with the Gregorian calendar, and it's similar to Anno Mundi. An example, 2015 is really 6015. The calendar error, which would designate 4001 BC as year 0, or was adopted in 18th century. So basically what they're saying is they recognize that before Jesus gets here, there was 4,000 years since the creation. Now, we just did a big series on creationism, and they're telling us that the earth is millions and millions and millions of years old. Even the Masons believe that there's really 4,000 years before Jesus gets here. So after Jesus has been 2,000, so we're in about 6,015. Technically, from 6 to 7 should be, or whenever that year is, we may be off a few years or half of a century, but whenever that time starts, the 7th day really is the day of peace. It's the day Jesus comes back and establishes his throne on the earth. It's the millennial reign. So the 7th day is his day, a day of rest when Jesus is on his throne for 1,000 years. But now we've had human history 6,000 years. There's been 6,000 years of human history, and here we are at the end of the 40th Jubilee Shemitah cycle. Number 5. I'm skipping pictures, y'all. I'm supposed to be showing you all pictures. Anno Lucius. These are just the things. Okay. This one's interesting. The UN resolution for the state of Palestine. It's happening. It's happening September 15, next month. There's a resolution, and we've had resolutions in the past, but this time it's being submitted by France to the United Nations, and I'm just going to read you the article. There's been a lot of talk about things that are going to happen in September, but something has been almost totally overlooked in the fact that the United Security Council is likely to be voting on a UN resolution which will establish a Palestinian state at that time. Right now, France is working on a proposed resolution which would give formal UN Security Council recognition to the Palestinians. It would declare that a divided Jerusalem is the capital of both Israel and the Palestinian state. Now listen, this is how it's going to happen. There will be divided. The Bible says, measure the outer courts. Measure the temple, but also measure the outer courts, and the outer courts are going to be trampled by Gentiles. So even in the book of Revelation, the Bible talks about the mountain. There will be two temples standing there. The Muslim mosque that's there now does not have to be moved before the Jewish temple can be built. There's going to be a two-state solution. The Palestinians and the Jews will both have Jerusalem, and they'll share that mountain. And that's exactly what this resolution, and we've seen that for years, they've been talking about. Israel seems to be fine with that. The Palestinians, not so much, but if they can get this deal going, that's what's going to happen. But a Palestinian state, it would set the 1967 borders as the baseline for future negotiations, which would establish the final borders between the two nations. It is being reported that France will submit the resolution for the vote at the 70th session of the UN General Assembly beginning on the 15th of September. At this moment, 136 nations have already recognized the Palestinian state. It goes into some other things about our president and how upset he is about Benjamin Netanyahu coming to speak to Congress. He wasn't really happy. So it says that he's the one, we're not putting the resolution forward, but we encourage France to do so. And we basically said that we've always vetoed whatever measure they put about splitting up Israel. The United States has always used its veto power to keep that event from happening. They're saying this year we will not veto it. If the United Nations votes it, it's going to happen. This is monumental, because if it happens, we are in the middle of a peace accord, some type of peace accord. It looks like peace, but some type of peace accord, which will allow Israel to begin to build their temple, which will also allow a lot of things that the book of Revelation talks about. But this is something that this kind of blows your mind. You don't hear it on the news. You don't hear people talking about it. But it's going to happen. It will happen September 15th. They will put the vote across. If 136 nations, which they've had the vote before, in the past, vote, it's a done deal. Because I believe there's only 176 nations represented in the United Nations. It's done. That means there will be a two-state. Palestine will get its state. Who negotiated this deal? Who made this happen? We don't know exactly who that person is, but before it's over, the Bible says that a ruler, a Messiah will rise up, and he will be the one that brought this peace together, the confirmation of the covenant. He will be one that also goes into the temple, sits down, and at that point we'll know for sure who he is. The Bible says the day of desolation, the abomination of desolations, where he'll sit himself on the throne of God in the temple and declare himself to be God. That's the midpoint of that last 7-year period. The 3.5-year point, he does that. The temple has to be built. So you're going to have 3.5 years where Israel has control of the Temple Mount. They're going to be building. But at the half point, we'll know for sure who the Antichrist is. You better believe he's alive right now, and he's working behind this. It's not Barack. I don't think it's Barack Obama, because I believe he has to be a Roman or from the old Roman Empire. He has to have some Jewish blood ancestry in him also. So I don't know who is going to be. We don't even need to speculate that at this point. I know this much. There's a whole lot of Antichrist already out there. And they're working against God's plan. They're working systematically against the Christians, the Jews, everything that God has set his name on, they're working against it. Even in this nation, this Christian nation of ours has turned. I know in Detroit, we just gave you the article last month. Detroit, they just had the biggest satanic ceremony where that statue of all these names are slipping me now. Baphomet, which is Satan, that goat god. They displayed that in Detroit, and they had the biggest satanic gathering they've ever had in this country. Unbelievable. I know the original people that had the hotel that was supposed to be hosting it found out what was going on and kicked them out. They found another place to do it. But supposedly, according to them, it was a great success. And the first time that the statue was opened publicly for people to touch it and see it and worship it. And it happened in Detroit just 2 or 3 weeks ago. This nation has taken a great turn. You heard about 1973, abortion. Well, just this year, our White House was turned every color of the rainbow. because of same-sex marriage. These are issues, saints, that you can't do them and hide them in the closet. God sees them, and they sit before him day and night. And every time he sees this nation, he can't see this nation without seeing the children that are being murdered every day, without seeing the things that he said were wrong being done and declared right. God is watching this nation, and God is making choices. We're coming up this month upon the Shemitah time, where God either chooses to bless a nation or to hurt a nation. And we're coming up once again, as we've seen the last 14 years, this nation has been in trouble on that Shemitah day. Here we go, next month, 2015, it's gonna happen again. The next thing I wanted to talk to you all is about a program, a military operation called Jade, Helm. A lot of people are uptight about it. Me personally, it doesn't bother me. If you live in Yuma, you've seen soldiers flying and landing right over here at Friendship Park. I don't know what the name of this park is. They bring the big giant Chinook helicopters in. Soldiers jump out, stand around the park with their guns. I don't believe they have bullets in them, but they stand on guard. They're bringing trucks and tanks in. They have their full. The first time that happened was 7-8 years ago. The first time they ran that drill, it messed me up because I'm already conspiracy theorist. So when I saw all them helicopters flying over my house that low, and they were landing down the street from my house, I was, the blood of Jesus, the blood of Jesus. Where are my kids at? Jesus, what's going on? So I got in the car and I went by there. Didn't know anything about the operation, but I drove by and I saw the soldiers standing there and oh my goodness, is this an invasion? Who is it? What's going on? Because military soldiers, and Curtis is in here this morning, military men aren't even supposed to come off base in their uniform, much less stand on post and stand in a defensive stance in the middle of a park on a main street of a civilian population. You don't see that. You don't see that. So when they first started running these drills, it messed a lot of people up. I made my phone calls, KYMA, what's going on? Come to find out, this is what they were getting American society used to seeing soldiers on its soil. Civilian forces, military forces, it really won't matter. United Nations forces, get used to it. Because if this really is not our nation and somebody's coming to claim what belongs to them, the only resistance they're going to have is what? Those of us that think it's our nation. But listen, this is not your nation. It hasn't been your nation for at least 100 years. At least 100 years. They've taken it. The people have taken it, legally taken it, out from under you without you even knowing it. Your home really isn't your home. If they want it, they're going to get it. Your municipality could come get your home if it wants to, eminent domain, but it's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. But American citizens don't have that way. They don't think that way. They believe that what they have is theirs, and they have a certain freedom that they don't have any longer. So Jade Helm is an event that's coming up. Let's read a couple of things to you. If this works with me. The first thing is, it's a request to conduct realistic military training. It's not going to move for me. There we go. A request. This is an official memo that was sent out when they started letting everybody know what was going to happen. It's a request to conduct realistic military training, Jade Helm 15. You may have heard a lot of states were uptight about it, especially Texas. I'll show you that in a second. The purpose of Jade Helm: the commander of the United States Army Special Operations Command seeks a written invitation and approval from local officials to conduct realistic military training within their jurisdiction of joint military exercise, Jade Helm 15. Realistic military training is training conducted outside of federally owned property, in other words, civilian territory. The RMT process is designed to ensure proper coordination between DoD, representatives, and local regional authorities. The process includes the following measures: risk assessment, medical communication plans, licensing requirements. I'm going to skip a lot of these acronyms. Legal review, ID of training, staging areas, staging areas, role-playing, airfield, drop zones, landing zones, surveys. Legal and letters of invitations obtained from local officials, mayors, and county commissioners. Coordination with local, state, and federal law enforcement. Public affairs review. What is Jade Helm? Jade Helm is a challenging 8-week joint military and interagency unconventional warfare exercise conducted throughout Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. Jade Helm is a U.S. Special Operations Command sponsored exercised to improve the Special Operations Forces UW capability as part of a national security strategy. Jade Helm will run from 15th of July through 15th of September. Who and where? Participants: U.S. Army Special Forces Command, Green Berets, U.S. Navy SEALs, U.S. Air Force Special Operations Command, USMC Marine Special Operations Command, USMC Marine Expeditionary Units, 82nd Airborne Division, interagency partners. Local exercises just within Texas: Bastrop, Smallville, Big Springs, Caddo Lake, Caldwell, Cristobal, Union, College Station, Dale City, El Dorado, Galiad, Junction, Leakey. The only reason I'm reading these is because you're here, Cheryl. You might know what I'm talking about. But these are some, San Antonio, that sounds familiar. This is some of the ones in some of the places in Texas that are going to be drilling. Right here, this is when everyone got really uptight when this news was announced. They had a map, and on their map, they highlighted certain states as being hostile. Hostile to who? Hostile nations. And if you really focus on the map, it's interesting. The states that are in red are actually red states, Republican states. And I got a lot of people upset, Republicans upset too, that their states seem to be, Southern California is actually a very Republican part. Actually, Southern California has already signed a petition to make itself a separate state. They're trying to break off from California, making Northern and Southern California, which would be a whole different political thing. But San Diego, from here up into San Diego, you see a whole bunch of stuff that, anyway, Utah, Southern California, and Texas did not appreciate this map because this map lists them as hostile. Arizona is listed as light blue. They're uncertain about Arizona. Colorado, California, and Nevada, which are blue states, are permissive to them. And New Mexico is uncertain. It's leaning hostile. When this map came out, people went crazy because they didn't understand. Is this martial law? Are you about to, what are you doing? They didn't get in, they just kind of got mocked. But in all reality, think about it. If the United States government starts running military drills that have not been seen within this nation since the founding of this nation, and open civil property, every state should wonder, unless the states don't have the power they once had. And that we're starting to see a lot of things at this point. This might not be the country we think it is, or it may not belong to who we think it is. Because Texas revolted and they kicked and they screamed against this happening, and it got nothing done. It's still happening. When I was in we went to the council in July when they were starting this thing. We were at the council. We went from Phoenix up to Kingman and spent the night. When we got to our hotel in Kingman, there was a van, and he parked right next to us, and about 10 or 15 guys that were in full SWAT gear, desert SWAT gear, got out of the van and started walking across the street to go get some food at Bob's Big Boy. But it was so weird to see this fully dressed SWAT team getting out of a white van. They didn't have their own squad cars. They all got out of a big white van and just kind of marched together to the restaurant in their full military guard. Then we go down the street, and then these semi trucks are coming off the interstate with tanks and Humvees, all kinds of military vehicles just coming into Kingman. So these drills are already being run in different cities, and I saw with my own eyes. Increased military presence, increased aircraft and light at night. You may receive noise complaints. Individuals will conduct suspicious activities designed to prepare them for complex environments. It kind of goes on to tell you what it is. Jade Helm, some people speculate that this right here gives you an indication of something that could happen. There was a movie that came out with John Travolta not long ago. It was called Broken Arrow. Some of you may have seen it. And it was really about a nuclear bomb that was hijacked, or it was stolen because it was hijacked and stolen. When that happens, the code name for that is Broken Arrow. There's a nuclear bomb out there, and it's floating. So a lot of people speculated that there's a Broken Arrow scenario happening, that somebody may have snuck in a nuclear weapon, or they've recovered a nuclear weapon that's possibly going to be detonated within the nation, and these are the types of operations they're planning to try to find it or fix it among us. They have to work among us. If the threat is here on homeland, they're saying they've got to be able to move in and out and do it. So this is why they're practicing. But if it's a broken arrow scenario, or if it's just a clue saying it, some people think it's really there's really something they're preparing for. And in all reality, saints, if by the end of this thing you start seeing if what we think is going to happen, maybe it's unrest, if it's disaster, if it's world conflict, if these things are really going to happen, so whatever it is, it's unsettling in the very least, but the suspicion is it concludes right in the middle of everything that's already going to be happening in September. They've got everything in place. If I've got to start moving big loads of food and supplies and trucks and tanks all across the country, but I don't want the American citizens to get uptight about it, what would I need to do? I would need to have some type of operation that makes it look like we're just playing war game scenarios, when behind the scenes they're really moving supplies and doing what they need to do to position themselves in case some kind of event happens. Number 7, International Day of Peace. This one kind of is very, very interesting. September 21st, this is what Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General of the United Nations, says: over the next 100 days, let us stand with the millions of people across the world who are suffering and the devastating impact of violence and conflict. Let us share the ideas and plans for helping and supporting them with their time of dire need. And the United Nations has this Day of Peace, and the Day of Peace is always in September. This year, that Day of Peace is on September 21st. And it reminds me of a scripture in 1 Thessalonians 5:3 that says, for when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them. When they say peace and safety, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. When you hear men talking about peace, listen, because the Bible tells you this will be one of the signs, one of the indicators. The next thing that's happening in September is Yom Kippur. This is the Day of Atonement. This is the day, September 21st, which actually starts and it begins hours after the Day of Peace, is the Day of Atonement. This is the Jewish day where they begin to, the Jewish calendar date, from sundown the night before to the next day. And everybody who observes Yom Kippur, they fast that entire day and they're praying for their sins to be washed away. They're praying for God to accept the sacrifice. The Day of Atonement is the day that the high priest goes into the temple and he presents the sacrifice upon the ark of the mercy seat. He sprinkles the blood for the atonement of the sins of Israel. This is the day, Yom Kippur. This day actually happens right after the Day of Peace concludes. Yom Kippur kicks in. So starting from the 21st right on up to the 27th is going to get a little bit more interesting. The next thing, and the 9th thing, and I'm only going to talk about 2 more things and we're done, is the day of Arafat, 2015. It actually is on September 22nd, and it's a great pilgrimage in the Muslim faith, a great pilgrimage from Mount Arafat. I'll just read you the article. Wait for judgment at the gates of heaven. They sit and they wait for judgment at the gates of heaven to open. At dawn of this day, Muslim pilgrims will make their way from Mina to the nearby hillside of the plain called Mount Arafat and the plain of Arafat. It is from this site that Muhammad gave his famous farewell sermon in his final year of light. And those that were there, I guess, at Muhammad's sermon said he actually ascended into the sky. So they believe it's a portal. It's a place where heaven opens above them and God will receive or come down. It's like their Jacob's ladder, Mount Arafat. It's their holiest place in Islam. The completion of Allah's blessing refers to forgiving for one's sins by Allah, as without it, the blessings of Allah cannot be complete. This brings to light the importance of being forgiven by Allah. Those not performing pilgrimage are permitted to fast on Arafat Day. It is expected that Allah will expiate the sins committed the previous year. It was narrated by Aisha that Muhammad said, there is no day on which Allah frees more people than from the fire of the day of Arafat. He comes close and expresses his pride. That's a weird word, but he comes close and he expresses his pride to his angels, saying, what do these people want? That's what Allah says. He comes to the angels with pride and what do these people want? And that's the day he'll take away their sins more than any other day. That doesn't sound like the God we serve. But with pride, Allah will approach them and say, what do these people want? This the next thing. So that's on the day, that's on the 21st. And the next thing is, okay, that's Mecca. You all have seen that, right? It's a great pilgrimage. A lot of people attend that. These are the dates. The 70th Jubilee year, and we already talked about that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We already talked about that, but this particular day, the clock has been ticking. This is the Jubilee year. This year, starting September 23rd, kicks off. This would be the year everybody's freed from jail and they get their land back. Very, very significant day, because it is a day that begins an entirely new cycle. So if something were to happen from God, more than likely it's going to happen now. It has to happen now. Otherwise, I hate to say it like this, he's kind of locked into another 49-year cycle until the next year of Jubilee. This is the time to do what he needs to do, whether it's to bless or whether it's to bring down. And there's tremendous shaking. This is just, I'm finished with the notes. This is just the beginning, saints. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to show you some things that will make the hair on the back of your head stand up. There are a lot of significant things happening. The Pope's coming to America. There's some scientific things that have never been done in the world that even some of the top scientists are so afraid of that are happening. And they're even saying they've already begun to see apparitions and spirits. Scientists don't know what to call them, but they're seeing things, strange things, that they don't even know how to react to it. And they haven't even started the experiments the way they should yet. Those should occur in September. So we're looking at some tremendous things. I was talking to Sister L last week, and she reminded me of the Georgia Stones, where somebody, they don't know who actually put it there, what organization, but one of the first commandments or the bylaws are to keep the population under 500 million. That's one of their goals, to keep population under 500 million. And this isn't just isolated to that city. These are some of the writings that came out of the 18th century eugenics experiments, where it starts talking about keeping population in its place, because if we overpopulate, we're going to, we won't be able to maintain man. Man will be too hard to control. And not only that, we won't be able to feed them. You'll see starvation all around the world. So you got a lot of things happening, and a lot of people are speculating this might be the season and the time that mankind cuts the population way down. And this isn't strange. The Bible tells us that there's a war coming. The sixth trumpet blows. There's a war that is coming, and the Bible says 1/3 of men will be lost, will be killed in this next war. Technically, that would be 2.8 billion people killed, destroyed. Now, we only have 350 million in our country, so there's a lot more people than us dying. The only way to kill that many people is nuclear. So a lot of people have nuclear. I've heard some of the top scientists are talking about an asteroid the size of, I forgot what, this is a huge asteroid is headed into our solar system, and they're afraid that this time the gravity from other planets will pull it off course enough to where it can strike Earth or Earth's moon or something, to where it would devastate us. I don't know about all of that. I don't necessarily believe that. I believe man is more likely to make something happen and blame it on an asteroid, because how would we prove what it is anyway? But I don't know what the event could be or would be, but what I do know is that a lot of people, even when I was in college, they talked about population control. The Bible says that 1 million people, now technically I believe it will be a global nuclear war. The Bible says that the spirits out of the river Euphrates will come up, and those spirits will begin to trigger things that are going to cause this event. So I think it's World War III coming out of some of the things we've seen rising in the Middle East and just kind of spreading, whether it be bombs detonated here, they abroad, wherever. But once that game starts, the fallout will be 1/3 of man. World War I, World War I killed 14 million. World War II killed 52 million. World War III will kill at least, if it happens now, it would kill 2.7 billion people. So it would definitely turn the world upside down and change things. But a lot of people are speculating what could happen. Some people are thinking aliens will be revealed this month. I don't know. But before you dismiss the alien conspiracy, I'm gonna tell you this. Some of the top scientists in the world are absolutely convinced. They're not atheists anymore. They believe that the Big Bang could have never happened on its own. There had to be an intelligence that started it. So even the top scientists of the world are saying aliens exist or they are here. When you mix that up with a lot of things, if the world thought aliens existed, the Pope even said this. I don't know if you heard this a few months ago. The Pope said, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, the Pope said that if there are aliens and they come here, the Catholic Church is going to baptize them. But we joke and we laugh, but that's what they said. Because for relationships, to build man and alien relationship, the Pope's going to baptize them. However, he did say this also. More than likely, if there are aliens, they know God in a more sophisticated way than we do. So they're probably going to have more revelation for us. And before that whole thing was over, they said, we may even find that most of the gospels that we've held on to are secondary or second class to the light and the illumination that will be revealed by these extraterrestrials. Now that is a big statement. There's a lot in that, because the illumination has a lot to do with what a lot of people believe. The Masons, for instance, you can ascend to a certain level of illumination and you're enlightened enough to become almost a god. There's a lot of pagan stuff out there that is mixing with the words I'm hearing coming from the Vatican and from scientists. A lot of things that are happening. In school, my professor asked the question, and he pointed it out to me because he knew I was a Christian and I was strong in my faith. He said, so Carl, if the aliens did land today, what would that do for your God? Flat out asked me, and the whole class is looking at me. And I knew they were already kind of halfway alien people. Everybody's waiting for aliens. But what would that do for your God? Would it prove to you that religion and God is just a farce? And I said, no, not necessarily. I said, if there are other creatures on other planets, all it would show me is that my God is bigger than I thought he was. But it still has nothing to do with my sins. I belong to Jesus Christ. He washed my sins away. The word that God has given me still stands, regardless of aliens being there. But there's a lot of people saying that are ready to drop their faith in God if aliens pop up. Yeah. It would answer too many questions for them. So when the biggest thing to fear sense would probably be the mob mentality of the world. You know how mobs get together, numbers get together. If the world gets together behind these banners, those of you that stand out in Christianity, you're a Jew lover, Jesus lover, you guys are in a lot of trouble. So I'll end it right there. Give the Lord a hand praise this morning.